realized at some point that I had gone through the same sort of intellectual upheavals that F.A. Hayek did. F.A. Hayek was a great economist who won the Nobel Prize. And he had spent his whole life agitating for the gold standard and pushing for a sound monetary policy to be imposed from the top down. And I mean, he urged governments to switch before the Great Depression hit. Nobody listened to him. Great Depression happened. He issued all kinds of warnings before even the German hyperinflation that there's a coming calamity. They didn't pay any attention to it. He spent his whole life advocating these things for governments to do. They never did them. And so finally, by 1974, he wrote a beautiful monograph called The Denationalization of Money and said, if we're going to have sound money in the future, it's not going to come from central banks, it's not going to come from governments. It's got to come from the private sector itself. And he went through a series of speculations on what private sector money might look like. Maybe it's a commodity basket. It's a new kind of coin that emerges from the market itself. Now, this is 1974, before the digital age, but it's actually quite a prescient monograph. I would encourage you all to read it. Well, a remarkable thing happened in 2008. In the face of a global financial crisis, one programmer, maybe it was a team of programmers, we don't know, named Satoshi Nakamoto, did something that no economist, as far as I know, in the world thought was possible. He reinvented money based on digits alone, ones and zeros. He came up with the perfect money, divisible, portable, indestructible, rooted in property rights, scarce. He added a few extra elements that gold didn't have. No weight, no space. Transportable anywhere in the world with a click of a button. And a part of this innovation, he came up with this thing called the blockchain, which is a ledger that exists in the cloud that accounted for property rights with money itself. So every unit of Bitcoin, or every Bitcoin itself, had attached to it a title. And he made these titles non-reproducible. So there were real property rights in money. In other words, he made the perfect money out of code. How extraordinary is that? Unbelievable. And he released it not through the Senate Banking Committee, not through the American Institute for Economic Research, not through the Federal Reserve, not through the Harvard Faculty of Economics, but on a dopey little hacker forum, actually, where he shared the protocol with everyone. An open source system, not owned by anyone in particular, but rather owned by everyone, and accessible. So there doesn't have to be an audit the Fed movement, or an audit the Bitcoin movement. Anybody can audit the Bitcoin right now just by going and looking at the code. How extraordinary is that? Unbelievable. And he added to that cryptography so that people could share these Bitcoins and transfer them one to each other through trade without coughing up the whole of their identity. So you don't, just to trade, you don't have to have a third party, and you don't have to give up your medical information, your social security number, your credit history, and all the rest of it. You just have to have Bitcoin, and you transfer it from one person to another. And this program is unbelievably brilliant. And the more you look at it, the more you're just blown away by how exciting it is. Not just one innovation, but about 15 all rolled into one protocol. And there it sat for about a year, when finally it obtained its first indication of value. This is the question. Why did Bitcoin ever become valuable? Why? It doesn't make sense from a monetary point of view. Economic theorists didn't believe it was possible. Our traditional theory of money is that money grows out of barter. It grows out of a commodity that's been used in exchange already. And people discover that it's valuable, so they stop desiring it just for consumption's sake, but they acquire it in order to acquire other goods. That's what we've always believed. That's how gold became money. That's how silver became money. That's how everything becomes money. Bitcoin was different. So what gave Bitcoin its first indication of value? And the answer is the brilliant payment system, the blockchain itself, that allows the transference of real property geographically non-contiguously between any two individuals in the world. That is the source of Bitcoin's value. And then by February 2011, some 2 years later, it obtained the same value as the dollar. And many of the tragic move in many people's lives, actually.